If you've been following my channel for a while, you know some surface level things about me, that I love fighting games, superheroes, and Anna Kendrick. And based on the time I've mentioned it once or twice elsewhere, or simply based on the specific and heavy ways I deal with interests like these, you may also know that I have autism spectrum disorder, formerly known as Asperger's syndrome. This is normally the part of the video where I might break down what the autism spectrum is and how it affects people, but I imagine if you click this video you have some idea. But if you happen to not, I actually rather hope this video could help lay the matter out. With the help of a character I've always connected with, and for one big reason I only recently realized, because he functions as a full-hearted allegory for autism. Buddy the Elf. Now, note my phrasing that he functions as an allegory, not that he necessarily is canonically autistic. I don't want to insist that Buddy the Elf is beyond doubt representative of an autistic experience, or that the lines I've drawn were intended by Jon Favreau or anyone behind the film. That said, where art lies after it's released is with the consumer, and my interpretation is simply that, and valid as anyone else's. I also think when discussing autistic representation, it's crucial to recall that autism and adjacent disorders are historically and massively underdiagnosed. Experts predict that for every 3 diagnosed cases of autism spectrum disorder, there are 2 additional cases undiagnosed. Behaviors associated with ASD are sometimes easy to write off as idiosyncrasies or overlap with other disorders, making it a difficult thing to pin down in a lot of cases. The reason I divulge that is because I feel in fictional works there are many instances of characters who show behavior associated with being on the spectrum who aren't diagnosed on screen per se. Habits and distinctions we commonly associate with being on the spectrum, be it hyperfixation, savant syndrome, social difficulties, or staunch physical inclinations, are also common in people who aren't on the spectrum, and ASD is much more common than we think. With that in mind, I think representation of characters on the spectrums is often unintentional, if not vague. The works of James Gunn, for instance, very often have characters who take things literally when not intended, and have difficulty detecting sarcasm. I've never seen Gunn say that he intends these characters to represent an autistic experience. I think they simply align with his sense of humor. But characters like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy and Vigilante from Peacemaker are largely adopted as characters highly relatable to viewers on the spectrum. It's a difficult thing to navigate. I'm sure no shortage of fictional characters are caricatures of people encountered by their creator, and any number of those people may have ASD, diagnosed and or disclosed, or otherwise. A big coming out moment for disability like ASD isn't always organic or even necessary for a character to represent the matter, and representation doesn't have to be literal, as is the way I read the story of Buddy the Elf, a human baby who was accidentally swept to the North Pole where he was raised as an elf, causing Buddy to behave like a light-hearted elfin creature despite being a man of a stature north of 6 feet tall. As Buddy grows up, he finds he doesn't fit into the world of an elf. Quite literally. His physical accommodations make everyday matters trivial for him, and his motor skills and inclinations of talent appear to differ greatly from an elf as well, considering he can't hold a candle to any other elf in the matter of making toys.
Just how many Etch-a-Sketches did you get finished?
I made, 85?
915 off the pace.
It appears Buddy has a disinclination from birth from the occupation of making toys, similar to the physical challenges faced by many people on the spectrum. Things that come naturally to elves are difficult to Buddy, just as holding still or enduring certain clothing materials may be difficult for one on the spectrum. Note that Buddy's disadvantage as a toy maker directly correlates with the fact that he's human and not an elf by birth, a factor he has no control over that impacts him heavily from the time that he was a baby, just like disability often does. Though it's also notable that when Buddy feels discouraged, the other elves are quick to remind him of talents that he has that the rest of them do not.
Seems like everyone else has the same talents except for me.
And you're the only baritone in the elf choir. You bring us down a whole octave.
In a good way.
Though this moment is largely played for laughs, this harkens back to special talents that people on the spectrum are prone to, sometimes begotten by savant syndrome. Although tasks that many people can manage easily may be challenging to someone on the spectrum, we often show surprising talents in very sharp, if not highly specific expertise or wisdom with certain tasks and topics that catch our interest or our natural inclinations. Buddy demonstrates that he contributes to the other elves, just not in a way that's conventional, or one that helps him feel less incongruous. A feeling shared by many people of the spectrum in their social circles and places of work. This places the, however credible stereotype that people on the spectrum are almost like Swiss Army knives of patchworks of knowledge and bizarre talents. A role that Buddy fits with the tasks only he can accomplish both in the North Pole and in his second venture of New York. Seeking a more resonant home, Buddy makes a pilgrimage to find his biological father. And despite thinking he may fit better among other humans like himself, he finds himself even more a fish out of water. Raised on elf customs, Buddy is completely alien to the less forgiving world of New York, and finds that people are less friendly than the company he's accustomed to in the North Pole. Buddy is in the unfortunate circumstance of being a human physically, but having the heart and childlike mind of an elf. He has no place he conventionally belongs because there's no one else truly like Buddy. Just as every person with ASD is different without a precise peer to act as a blueprint. Though people with autism do find solace in relating to one another, no two cases are identical, and there's no theoretical island where everyone shares their exact special interests, physical triggers, or challenges. Just as Buddy doesn't have any community of other humans raised as elves, per se. There are people who love and support Buddy, but he largely has to navigate his challenges on his own, as many people on the spectrum also do. The turn of phrase, "it's not a spectrum, it's a Sunday bar," is commonly used to illustrate just how much autism can vary across a range of cases. There are many symptoms and behaviors caused by and associated with autism spectrum disorder, and one may display any hodgepodge of associated qualities. You can't look at a list of germane traits and assume a case has all of them. They may show any number of them, perhaps only a few, perhaps all but one. And there's little consistency one can count on as to which traits come packaged together. One's place on the proverbial spectrum isn't an indicator of how many traits or which ones somebody displays, but rather the severity. What this means with people who are on the spectrum is that their disability can manifest in a myriad of fashions, which results in very broad advice for dealing with certain qualities, but no rule book or one-size-fits-all solution, which is exactly the conundrum of Buddy, as ostensibly the only human raised as an elf ever. There's no one with experience or an answer to his challenges. One of my favorite educational pieces on autism spectrum disorder is from the cartoon Arthur, which pretty deftly illustrates challenges faced by someone with autism as an allegory involving space travel.
For one, a lot of people seem to talk really loudly. Hey! And even though you speak the same language, you sometimes have a hard time understanding what they mean.
Good night for a banana fight, right?
And Buddy is in precisely this position. He isn't the story of a foreigner enduring culture shock because that would imply a home to return to. Buddy is truly one of a kind, as are the challenges he has to face, as is every case of autism and related disorders. Buddy's hurdles may be as small as taking something too literally.
Tony, if you want the thing you love,
You did it! World's best cup of coffee.
Or as grave as making outrageously offensive comments without even realizing.
you feeling strong, my friend? Call me Elf one more time.
He's an angry elf.
Despite what Buddy has to overcome, this being a fish out of water story, he of course has to help change the perspective of cynical people around him. This kind of ties back around to the way he benefited his first family in the North Pole. Buddy is so uniquely himself that he brings qualities to the table no one else really can. Buddy shows an eagerness and diligence towards decoration, as he adds his own festive flair to his local gimbals in a fashion that puts the store manager to outward shame. He also proves to be an invaluable asset to his impromptu half-brother. In both of these instances, he continues to show traits that resemble savant syndrome to a certain extent. Excessive talent in highly specific, only occasionally useful areas, but talent and benefit nonetheless. What I really like is that just as much as Buddy influences the people around him, Buddy learns a thing or two as well, and the narrative doesn't always excuse him. A lot of people remember the scene where he overhears Jovi singing in the shower and how creepily it's aged. Reasonably so. But Jovi actually confronts Buddy shortly after and makes it clear how uncomfortable that altercation made her. Buddy in turn establishes his own confusion and seems to learn a lesson.
How come you were in the women's locker room this morning?
I heard you singing.
You sure it had nothing to do with the fact that I was naked in the shower?
I didn't know you were naked.
It's the first conversation where Buddy is spurned to ask Jovi about herself and not pester her with Christmas stuff, and both come around to understand each other a bit more. This exchange as a whole is kind of a microcosm of my response to the film and criticism of it. Folks who dislike Elf seem to have a SpongeBob and Squidward dynamic with it, and that Buddy's antics lead to various degrees of catastrophe. The narrative seems to consistently side with him. But if you view his character arc isolated, the climax of what he needs to learn is his date with Jovi. The climax of the film as a whole is when he helps guide the sleigh, but that doesn't feel totally germane to his inner character conflict, just the superficial conflict on the outside. It's the date with Jovi where the two characters show their passions and what excites one another around New York, and they both learn about the point of view of the other. Jovi gains some behooving positivity, and Buddy develops some understanding of the concrete jungle he's so foreign to. The part toward the end where Walter melts down at his son for driving off Miles Finch shouldn't be taken as a lesson that redirecting Buddy in of itself is wrong, but it should be contrasted with Jovi's approach, where she's kind, mutually constructive, and understanding, while still remaining firm in places. I think that's the most important takeaway from Elf, especially around the holidays, one we all need from time to time. To have grace and patience with whoever you feel is making your gift shopping harder, a relative you're struggling with, or even an out-of-place, Christmas-focused man-child who's challenged with social norms. To give the benefit of the doubt and reward even the best of intentions, that the thought always counts, even if it's not quite what you anticipated. It's a time for meeting somebody halfway and understanding things at their level, just as Buddy's loved ones come around to doing with him, helping him find his place in the world where there's no place he neatly fits. I just think that's a wonderful message to carry around this time of year.